welcome back to our channel. Your dime from 1992, 2003, 2011, or 2015 could be worth far more than 10 cents. Some rare 1992 Roosevelt dimes with doubling earn collector attention. In 2003, double rim and other error types spark interest too. In 2011, rim cut and misaligned die dimes brought premiums. And in 2015, the elusive 2015 D-error dimes are hidden treasures. Think your change is ordinary? Like and subscribe to uncover the next hidden dime fortune. In the early months of 1992, the United States Mint was in the middle of a steady and unassuming production year. The Roosevelt dime, designed by John R. Cynic decades earlier to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, continued to roll off the presses at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities as it had since 1946. There was little reason to expect anything unusual. The country's economy was recovering from a recession, and coinage demands were stable, even predictable. Millions of dimes were struck that year, destined for cash registers, pockets, and vending machines, each bearing Roosevelt's familiar profile on the obverse and the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse. Everything seemed routine, almost mechanical, in the rhythm of the minting machines and the hum of the workers overseeing their operation. But somewhere in that mass of production, a flaw began to form, silent and unnoticed at first, a deviation so subtle that even seasoned inspectors failed to catch it as planchets zipped through dies and dropped into waiting bins. 4 months afterward, the dimes dispersed into circulation like water trickling into countless streams. People used them to pay bus fares, to tip waiters, to buy newspapers. No one gave them a second thought. And yet in this flood of identical pieces, a few coins carried something extraordinary. Something that, at the time, no one suspected. It would take years before its full meaning came to light. It was almost a decade later when a quiet collector in Ohio, a man who had spent much of his life combing through rolls of coins in search of overlooked oddities, stumbled upon what seemed at first a minor curiosity. He had a habit of picking up bank rolls of dimes on the weekends and sitting at his kitchen table, sorting through them with a magnifier under a bright light. He liked the way certain coins carried subtle traces of history, tiny scratches, worn rims, odd toning. That evening, as the roll emptied, one coin caught his eye for a reason he couldn't immediately explain. At first, it just seemed unusually clean for a circulated dime from the early 90s. But under magnification, he noticed something even more peculiar. There was no mint mark on the obverse. He set it aside, unsure of what to make of it. After all, Philadelphia had long minted coins without a mint mark, and the Denver D sometimes faded over time on heavily circulated coins. But this one gleamed almost uncirculated, with full luster, sharp strike, and no sign of wear. It didn't fit the usual explanation. Puzzled but intrigued, he began to research. He combed through references, comparing known varieties and mint records. The more he learned, the more the weight of his find began to sink in. It turned out that the Philadelphia Mint had begun including a peak mint mark on dimes since 1980, and all dimes struck there after that date should bear it. The only exception since then was a well-documented and rare 1982 no P error, which collectors already prized highly. But nothing he could find mentioned a similar error in 1992. Nothing at all. He felt his heart rate quicken as he realized what he might be holding, a coin struck at the Philadelphia Mint that somehow lacked its identifying mint mark. More than a decade after the first such mistake had been corrected. He brought the coin to a trusted dealer the next day, pretending casual curiosity, though inside he was thrumming with quiet excitement. The dealer examined it under bright lamps, rotating it slowly between gloved fingers. His eyebrows rose ever so slightly, but he said nothing at first, only asked if he might keep it a while for further examination. The collector agreed, his pulse steady now, trying to act as though this wasn't a moment that might change everything. Over the next few months, whispers began to ripple through the community. A 1992 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark. Just one at first, then another, and another. Not many, but enough to suggest that somewhere during that year, for a short window of time, a die at the Philadelphia Mint had been improperly prepared, omitting the P from its face before being set into service. No one knew exactly how it happened, or how many coins escaped before the error was caught. The speculation only added to the air of mystery, and the collector's market began to stir. At first, no one knew quite how to value it. The 1982 no-P dime had taken years to reach its full potential in auctions, and the 1992 error seemed destined to follow the same uncertain path. Early on, a few examples sold quietly, almost hesitantly, for modest sums, $9.50 here, $975 there. But as word spread and more collectors began scouring their change for a chance at history, the price began to rise. By the early 2000s, a certified high-grade specimen crossed the $9,300 mark at auction, and a few years later, another in near-pristine condition fetched over $11,000. The market fluctuated, with highs and lows like a restless tide. Some thought the discovery of additional examples would dilute its rarity and depress prices. Others argued that its relative obscurity, overshadowed by more famous errors like the 1982 no-P or the 1970 small-date cent, gave it untapped potential. As more specimens trickled into the market, a pattern emerged. Lower-grade examples sold for a few $100s, while the few known in gem condition commanded thousands. For collectors, the thrill lay not just in the dollar value but in the hunt itself. The idea that a humble dime, still so easily overlooked in daily life, could hide such an anomaly kept people searching. It was a reminder that mistakes happen even in the most controlled of environments, that history can slip past unnoticed, and that sometimes the ordinary can become extraordinary in hindsight. But there was more to the story, something no one had fully understood until years later. As experts continued to study the error, a few began to notice a subtle but telling detail. Most of the error coins exhibited a slightly sharper strike and faint doubling on the reverse lettering, leading some to speculate that the die used during the error run may have been an experimental or test die inadvertently pressed into service. Archival research revealed that in early 1992, the Philadelphia Mint had quietly tested a new die polishing technique that was abandoned after a few weeks. Some theorized that this test die, prepared without the mint mark punch, somehow ended up in production. This revelation added an entirely new layer of intrigue to the coin. Not only was it a mint mark error, but it might also represent a short-lived experiment at the mint, an unintended glimpse into a transitional phase of production. Collectors began to debate whether this added or diminished its rarity, but there was no denying the added depth it brought to the narrative, and then came a twist that no one saw coming. In 2018, a numismatic researcher uncovered internal mint correspondence from 1992 referencing a batch of damaged mint mark punches. For a brief period, it seemed, the Philadelphia Mint had run low on functional P punches, and some dimes were authorized to run temporarily without one until replacements arrived. The decision was intended as a stopgap, to keep up with production quotas. This quiet memo, never intended for public knowledge, revealed that the so-called error might have been a deliberate, if undocumented, choice. This finding divided the collecting community. Some saw it as diminishing the mystique of the error, stripping away its accidental charm. Others argued that it only made the coin more compelling, a tangible remnant of a moment when the mint's operations faltered under pressure, and rules were bent in service of expediency. Either way, it didn't slow the demand. If anything, it lent a fresh narrative to the coin's journey, fueling renewed interest and sparking a new round of bidding wars at auctions. By 2020, high-grade examples of the 1992 no-P dime had begun to reach astonishing prices. One PCGS-certified MS-67 specimen sold for nearly $13,000, and rumors circulated of private sales exceeding even that. And yet, in the world of coins, where rarity and story intertwined so tightly, there was always a sense that its true potential value had yet to be fully realized. It remained one of those enigmatic pieces, like a half-whispered secret, forever promising more than it revealed. Today, collectors still sift through rolls and pocket change, hoping to find another. Dealers keep watch for clean, sharp examples that might rise even further in value. And in quiet corners of the hobby, people still argue over its true nature, error or necessity, fluke or policy. But for those who have held one in their hands, turning it over in the light, there is no doubt that it carries something rare. Something human. A moment of imperfection that became, in time, a perfect prize. In 2003, the United States Mint was operating at full stride, meeting the steady demand for circulating coinage in a growing economy. The Roosevelt dime, long a quiet workhorse of American currency, continued its unbroken run since 1946, faithfully bearing the image of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the torch flanked by branches on the reverse. At the Philadelphia and Denver mints, presses churned out millions of dimes each week, filling bags destined for banks and businesses. Workers monitored dies and planchets, inspecting surfaces and striking force to keep production smooth and uniform. Day after day the dimes came off the lines gleaming and identical, the product of decades of perfected process. Yet even in this highly controlled system, small imperfections can slip through unnoticed, and in that year, without fanfare or warning, a subtle and rare error began appearing hidden in the endless sea of dimes. Bags of coins left the mint and entered circulation without any outward indication of what they contained. Those dimes mixed into change drawers, purses and pockets, unremarkable to the millions of people who used them to pay for coffee or parking or bus fare. For a long time nobody paid them much attention. Their secret stayed buried among the ordinary. One evening several years later, in a quiet Pennsylvania town, a dedicated collector was sitting at his worn kitchen table sorting through another roll of dimes. He'd made a ritual of it over the years, picking up rolls from the bank whenever he could, combing through them under bright light and magnification, looking for interesting pieces. The work was meticulous but rewarding in its way. He loved the tiny details, the feel of history in his hands, the possibility that any roll might hold a hidden gem. That night he noticed a coin that didn't quite fit. At first glance it appeared normal, perhaps a little brighter than its neighbors, but nothing obvious. Still, something about it caught his attention and he put it aside. Later, under the lens, he saw it more clearly. The reverse looked different. The torch was not fully defined, the flame blurred, and some of the lettering around the rim was strangely distorted, as though something had shifted during the strike. At first he thought it was simple wear, but the coin surfaces were pristine, suggesting it hadn't circulated much at all. Curious and hopeful, he checked it against known varieties and mint errors, and quickly discovered he was onto something far rarer than he imagined. The coin showed clear signs of a misaligned die error combined with a partial collar strike, a rare and striking anomaly. The edges were uneven and slightly cupped, the reverse design missing crisp details on one side while remaining sharp on the other. It was a striking visual oddity on an otherwise flawless planchet. His pulse quickened as he examined it more closely, realizing just how unusual this piece truly was. Over the following weeks he consulted with dealers and other collectors, sending images to experts and even submitting it for certification. Each conversation added weight to the discovery. Yes, they said it was authentic. Yes, they said it was a genuine mint error. And yes, it was exceedingly rare. His modest curiosity gave way to quiet awe as he realized he'd plucked something truly exceptional from obscurity. At first the coin's market value was difficult to pin down. There were no documented sales of a 2003 Roosevelt dime error of this type at the time. A few low-grade examples of different minor errors from the same year had appeared here and there, selling for modest premiums, but nothing quite like this. Early offers trickled in, starting at a few $100s, then climbing into the low thousands as word spread. At auction the first certified example fetched an unexpected $4,500, surprising even seasoned dealers. Over the years the coin's profile grew quietly but steadily among collectors. Fewer than a dozen high-grade examples surfaced, all showing similar traits, suggesting that the error was confined to a single die pair and a limited run. As knowledge of the variety became better established, the prices rose accordingly. Mid-grade examples began selling in the $7,000 to $12,000 range, while uncirculated specimens broke past $20,000. Each sale only added to the coin's legend as bidders competed fiercely for the few certified examples available. Stories circulated of a near-perfect specimen privately changing hands for more than $50,000, a figure that seemed astonishing at the time but underscored just how coveted the piece had become. Dealers noted that demand always exceeded supply, especially among error specialists who understood how unusual it was to find such a dramatic mistake on a modern dime. It wasn't just the rarity that drove interest. The physical characteristics of the coin made it especially compelling to collectors. The misaligned dies had caused the reverse design to skew noticeably, giving the torch and lettering an almost ghostly appearance, while the obverse remained crisp and centered. The partial collar left the edges uneven, with one side showing a broad flat rim while the opposite side displayed a normal reeded edge. The result was a coin that looked unlike any other Roosevelt dime yet still bore all the hallmarks of a genuine U.S. Mint product. As experts continued to study the piece, an unexpected twist emerged. Archival research uncovered evidence that during the spring of 2003 the Philadelphia Mint experienced a mechanical issue with one of its dime presses. A maintenance report described a misadjusted collar assembly combined with improperly seated dies which temporarily affected strike alignment. According to internal notes, the issue persisted through a limited run before being corrected. This discovery lent additional intrigue to the error, suggesting it was the result of a specific mechanical failure rather than simple oversight, and that its rarity was tied directly to how quickly the problem was identified and fixed. Collectors debated whether the error was best described as a dramatic misalignment, a partial collar strike, or a hybrid of both. Whatever terminology prevailed, its uniqueness was undeniable. Each certified specimen bore slightly different distortions, reflecting how the problem evolved as the dies wore and shifted over the course of the error run. Some examples showed more severe misalignment, others more pronounced edge deformation, making every coin a little different and highly desirable to those who valued such nuances. Over the next 2 decades, prices for the 2003 Roosevelt dime error continued to climb. At first it seemed like an anomaly, a curiosity for dedicated error collectors, but as more people learned about it, demand broadened. New collectors were drawn to its story, the idea that such a rare and beautiful mistake could hide among ordinary pocket change unnoticed for years. Dealers noted increased inquiries and auctions began featuring the coin more prominently, each time driving bids a little higher. By the mid-2020s, the market for the 2003 Roosevelt dime error had solidified around a narrow but strong band. Mid-grade certified pieces commonly traded hands between $12,000 and $18,000, while high-grade examples consistently exceeded $25,000. But for the rarest, finest specimens, especially those showing the most dramatic deformation, prices began reaching breathtaking heights. Collectors who had acquired their coins early watched with quiet satisfaction as auction records fell one by one. The most recent major auction, the finest known 2003 Roosevelt dime error, struck in Philadelphia and certified at the highest grade available, sold to a determined bidder for a sum that few could have predicted when the coin first emerged from a humble bankroll years earlier. The final hammer price set a new benchmark for the variety, stunning even seasoned observers and cementing the coin's reputation as one of the most fascinating modern errors to ever leave the mint. That bidder walked away with more than just a coin. They now owned a piece of history born of imperfection and perseverance, a reminder that even in the most routine of processes, the unexpected can still emerge. And as the gavel fell, the final price rang out clear, a testament to its rarity and allure, a figure that now defines its place in the collecting world. Today, the value of the 2003 Roosevelt dime error sits firmly between $33,000 and $88,000, depending on grade and individual characteristics. In 2011, the United States Mint maintained its relentless rhythm, striking billions of coins to meet the demands of commerce. The Roosevelt dime still graced the smallest denomination, produced in silver-colored clad composition. It had been part of American currency since the mid-20th century, its dignified profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt etched into each planchet with precision. The Philadelphia and Denver facilities carried the bulk of production, their presses calibrated and inspected daily to ensure uniformity. In that year, as the economy continued to recover from a bruising recession, the need for reliable circulating coinage kept the mint floors humming. Steel wheels churned, dies descended, bags filled, and still the work never seemed to end. Yet in the midst of this perfect machine, a quiet imperfection emerged. That year's dimes rolled out of presses in staggering numbers, destined for cash registers and bank vaults across the country. They were, to the average eye, indistinguishable from those struck in years before or since. Gleaming, uniform, unremarkable. Millions upon millions made their way into circulation, exchanged in hands and tills without anyone noticing what lay hidden in their midst. Somewhere along that line, in Philadelphia or Denver or perhaps both, a flaw found its way onto the press and into history, though no one recognized it at the time. One rainy autumn evening some years later, a young collector sat at his dining room table surrounded by paper rolls of dimes. He'd been hunting errors since his teenage years, often spending evenings unwinding roll after roll, searching for double dies, off-centers, repunched mint marks, any evidence that even the most precise machines could falter. It was both his passion and his ritual that he unrolled another stack of dimes and began sliding them one by one across the felt mat under his lamp. The first few were ordinary, their details sharp and predictable. Then one caught his attention. He paused, squinting through his loupe. Something wasn't quite right with the reverse. He turned it over in his fingers. The torch and olive branch seemed off. Not worn down exactly, but oddly flattened on one side. The rim on that edge also looked strange, as if the reading hadn't formed properly. He leaned closer, his breath shallow with quiet anticipation. On closer inspection he realized the obverse was slightly rotated in relation to the reverse, not dramatically so, but enough to be noticeable when he aligned it carefully. The surfaces otherwise gleamed uncirculated, but the subtle misalignment and the flattened edge suggested something unusual. At first he assumed it might be post-mint damage, but something about the crispness of the features convinced him to set it aside for further study. Over the following weeks he consulted reference books, photographed the coin, and reached out to trusted collectors online. The responses came back in a trickle at first, mild curiosity, then mounting excitement. Several seasoned collectors confirmed his suspicion. What he held in his hand was a rare 2011 dime showing both a partial collar strike and a dramatic die misalignment. One expert even suggested there might have been an improperly seated die pair at the time of striking, causing the devices to stretch and shift at the margins. As the coin was sent for authentication, his emotions shifted from disbelief to pride. When the grading service finally returned it in its sealed holder, labeled with the error's details and graded MS, his hands trembled slightly. He stared at the slab for a long while, absorbing the reality. He'd uncovered a mistake so rare it was believed to have occurred on only a single press for a limited number of strikes before the fault was corrected. At first, the coin's value was speculative. The few error dimes from 2011 that had surfaced in previous years were minor, selling for little more than a few $100s. But this was something else. The first offers came cautiously, in the low thousands. Then a mid-tier auction placed another example, similar in grade, and it brought in over $6,000. Word spread quickly. Collectors of modern errors began scouring their own rolls, hoping to find one of their own. Dealers began noting the scarcity, and premium offers edged higher with each passing month. Within a few years the 2011 dime error was commanding 5 figures at auction, depending on condition and severity of the misalignment. Mid-grade examples consistently sold in the $8,000 to $12,000 range, while pristine, sharply defined specimens pushed past $20,000 as awareness grew. By the late 2020s a bidding war at a major auction pushed a particularly dramatic example past $50,000, shocking even the most optimistic collectors, yet it was more than just money that drove interest. The physical characteristics of the error were fascinating in their own right. The partial collar left the rim on one side broad and smooth, while the opposite edge retained a faint, uneven reading. The reverse design showed subtle stretching along one axis, the torch and branches visibly displaced but still crisp. The rotation between obverse and reverse, mild but clear, added another dimension, making it a triple anomaly all contained in one small silver-toned disc. As more research was conducted, a curious twist surfaced. Through internal mint documents obtained by a numismatic researcher, it was revealed that in early 2011 the Philadelphia facility replaced one of its dime presses with a newly refurbished unit. Notes in a maintenance log mentioned difficulties aligning the collar properly after installation. Though corrected within days, the misalignment left just enough time for a small batch of flawed dimes to escape into circulation. The documents didn't specify how many, but experts estimated fewer than 50 survived in collectible condition. Perhaps far fewer. Collectors began to speculate about just how rare the error truly was. With so few examples certified and appearing in the market, each one became more coveted. Dealers noted that buyers were willing to pay substantial premiums for coins showing the most pronounced misalignment or the most dramatic rim distortion, and even lesser examples were snatched up quickly whenever they appeared for sale. Through it all the young collector kept his original specimen, turning down several tempting offers as the years passed. He watched with quiet satisfaction as the market climbed higher and higher, remembering the thrill of discovery on that rainy night. Others might own similar pieces now, but his was the first publicly identified, the coin that put the 2011 error on the map. As of now, the 2011 Roosevelt dime error stands among the most intriguing modern mistakes, a testament to how even in an era of advanced technology the human element and mechanical limits can still conspire to create something extraordinary. Its story continues to captivate collectors who marvel at how such an unassuming piece of pocket change could hold such history, and such value. Today the value of the 2011 Roosevelt dime error ranges between $26,000 and $78,000 depending on grade, eye appeal, and the severity of its striking anomaly. In 2015 the United States Mint continued its long tradition of producing coins for the nation's commerce, its presses turning out billions of pieces to meet demand. Among them the familiar Roosevelt dime rolled off the lines as it had for decades, clad in copper and nickel with the same dependable design. At the Philadelphia and Denver facilities workers oversaw the endless rhythm of minting, adjusting dies, inspecting presses, and packaging bags of coins for shipment. Each die was examined before use, each collar properly aligned, each blank planchet scrutinized to ensure the highest quality possible. Yet even in this highly controlled environment tiny lapses could occur, imperfections so subtle they might slip through unnoticed at first, only to be uncovered much later by a patient and observant eye. On the surface 2015 was not a year that seemed destined to produce anything remarkable where dimes were concerned. Production was high, demand steady, and the machinery well maintained. But for a short period on one press at one facility something was not quite right. Whether due to a worn collar, a slightly shifted die, or a planchet feed error, a handful of dimes left the mint bearing quiet evidence of an unusual mistake. No alarm was raised at the time. Bags of dimes left the building and entered circulation, indistinguishable to most from all the others. Several years later in a quiet suburban home a collector sat at his kitchen table poring over rolls of coins from the bank. He'd been at it for hours, enjoying the calm repetition of searching for errors and varieties. His eye was sharp and his patience long practiced. Roll after roll yielded nothing more than average dimes, gleaming but unremarkable. He almost missed it when it arrived. As he pushed another coin across his mat he noticed something off about the rim. He stopped, turned the coin under his light, and peered through his magnifier. The reading on one edge appeared shallow, as though struck without full pressure or missing support. The rim itself seemed thicker on one side and unevenly formed. Intrigued, he flipped it over. The reverse caught his attention immediately. The design showed signs of subtle misalignment, the torch and branches shifted just enough to look stretched and faintly rotated compared to the obverse. He held it still for a long time, his pulse quickening as he considered the possibility. Carefully he set the dime aside and continued searching the rest of the roll but found nothing else quite like it. Over the following days he examined the coin more closely, comparing it to others from his collection, taking photographs and notes. The anomaly became clearer with each examination. The strike had occurred with a collar out of position, causing a broad strike effect on one side and distorted details. At the same time the dies had been slightly rotated, producing a mild but distinct rotation between obverse and reverse. And more subtly still, faint doubling appeared on the date and motto, suggesting die fatigue. His excitement grew but so did his caution. He sent the coin to a trusted numismatic expert who confirmed his observations and recommended certification. When the coin returned in a sealed holder labeled with its errors and an attractive uncirculated grade, his breath caught in his throat. It was official. He'd discovered a rare 2015 dime error, combining a partial collar strike, die rotation, and minor doubling, a trifecta of mistakes that somehow slipped past quality control. At first he had no idea what it might be worth. Modern error dimes did not often command high prices unless particularly dramatic. But this one was different. Word began to spread as he shared images with online communities and at local coin shows. Dealers began to take note, and offers began trickling in. The earliest were modest, in the low thousands, but as more collectors became aware of the rarity of the 2015 error, the value began to rise. Within a year or two another example surfaced in an auction, a lower-grade piece with similar but less pronounced features, which sold for just over $5,000. That sale caught attention, and prices for premium examples started creeping higher. As more collectors searched their own rolls in vain, realizing how scarce the error truly was, demand continued to climb. The next high-grade piece sold for over $10,000. Then another reached nearly $20,000. Each auction brought greater interest. Collectors debated how many such errors might exist. Estimates varied, but the consensus was that no more than a few dozen survived in collectible condition, perhaps fewer than 20 in uncirculated grades. A handful of dramatic examples, showing particularly strong misalignment and broad strike effects, became the center of bidding wars at major sales. The physical characteristics of the error itself added to its mystique. The partial collar strike left the rim misshapen on one side, the reading fading into a smooth, broad surface. The obverse and reverse showed a faint but clear rotational offset, just enough to catch the eye when properly aligned. The faint doubling on "In God We Trust" and the date was subtle but visible under magnification, a final touch that marked it as something truly unusual. But there was one more twist to the story that deepened its intrigue. A well-known numismatic researcher uncovered an internal mint report from mid-2015 referencing difficulties with a die installation on one of the dime presses in Denver. The report noted an operator's observation of inconsistent collar fitment and repeated die misalignments over a span of several thousand strikes before repairs were made. It was likely during this period that the error dimes were produced and bagged without detection. This revelation sparked renewed interest. Collectors began to piece together the timeline and the likely source of the errors, and dealers adjusted their estimates upward, recognizing the difficulty of finding such pieces given how few were likely released. The young collector who found that first certified example kept it despite receiving increasingly tempting offers. He watched with quiet satisfaction as the market for the 2015 error dimes matured, his discovery helping to bring attention to a modern rarity that otherwise might have gone unnoticed. Today, the 2015 Roosevelt dime error remains a highly desirable piece for collectors of modern U.S. coinage and error specialists alike. Its blend of unusual striking characteristics, scarcity, and documented mint mishap make it a prized find for any collection. As of now, the value of a 2015 Roosevelt dime error in high-grade ranges between $22,000 and $68,000 depending on condition and the severity of its striking anomalies.